The branch cracked beneath her weight like a gunshot in the silence. Callie froze halfway down the ancient oak, her bare feet slipping against bark still warm from the day's heat, the red dress tangled around her thighs. Moonlight carved shadows through iron gates below, turning the Marquesi garden into something between sanctuary and trap. Her heart hammered so loud she was certain everyone inside the mansion could hear it. The women in their jewels, the men in their $1,000 suits, all of them belonging to a world that would chew her up and spit her out the moment they realized she was nobody. 3 more branches. Just 3 more, and I'm free. Her fingers, sticky with sap and fear, reached for the next hold. Then she saw him. A man in a black suit stood directly below, arms crossed, face half hidden in shadow. Watching. Waiting. Like he'd known exactly where she'd run. "Interesting exit strategy," he said, his voice smooth as expensive whiskey. Callie's breath caught. Her grip loosened. The world tilted. She fell, not far, but far enough, and then there were hands, strong and certain, catching her mid-air. Arms locked around her waist, pulling her against a chest that felt like stone wrapped in silk. Her face stopped inches from his, close enough to see the dangerous gleam in dark eyes, close enough to smell cedar and something darker, something that made her pulse spike for entirely different reasons. His voice dropped lower, intimate and lethal. "Running from me, Piccola Colomba? Little dove." She should have been terrified. She should have pulled away. But his hands didn't move to release her, and her heart, traitorous thing, didn't tell her to run. Not anymore. Tell us where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us bring you more powerful stories. Stay tuned, because tomorrow's story is one you won't want to miss. The apartment smelled like old books and chamomile tea, Callie's 2 favorite things in a world that often felt too loud, too fast, too much. She sat cross-legged on her threadbare couch, highlighter poised over a psychology textbook, when the door burst open with enough force to rattle the single-framed photograph on the bookshelf. Her mother's face, frozen in time, seemed to wobble in disapproval. Absolutely not. Callie didn't even look up. She knew that particular brand of chaos. Whatever you're about to say, Sienna, the answer is no. Sienna Martinez, all 5'2" of relentless optimism wrapped in designer everything, swept into the room carrying a garment bag like it contained the Holy Grail. "You're coming to a party tonight. No arguments. I have finals in 3 days. You've been studying for 2 weeks straight. Your brain is going to melt. My brain is fine. Your brain is lonely." Sienna draped the garment bag over the couch arm, then dropped onto the cushion beside Callie with enough dramatic flair to send the textbook sliding. "When was the last time you did something just because it sounded fun?" Callie caught the book before it hit the floor, fingers automatically finding the page she'd been on. "I had coffee yesterday. That was fun." "You had coffee alone while reading about cognitive behavioral patterns. That's not fun, babe. That's a cry for help wrapped in caffeine." Despite herself, Callie's lips twitched. Sienna had that effect, pulling smiles from places Callie thought she'd locked away 3 years ago, when her mother's hospital bed became an empty space in their living room, and the world went from full of possibilities to terrifyingly vast. "It's at an estate," Sienna continued, sensing weakness. "Old money, old architecture. Think gardens, vintage library, probably some pretentious art collection. Very you." Callie's resistance wavered. She'd always loved old places, the way history settled into walls, the stories that lingered in dusty corners. It was why she'd chosen literature as her minor, why she still carried her mother's battered fairy tale anthology everywhere, the one with marginalia in her mother's handwriting. All the best stories start with someone brave enough to leave home. What kind of party? Callie asked, hating how much she wanted to say yes. Does it matter? Sienna was already unzipping the garment bag, revealing a flash of crimson silk. You're 23, Callie. You're allowed to have an adventure that doesn't involve fictional characters. The dress emerged like something from another world, deep red, elegant, with a neckline that suggested confidence Callie wasn't sure she possessed. It was beautiful. It was terrifying. I can't wear that. You can and you will. Sienna held it up to Callie's frame, her dark eyes assessing. Perfect. You'll look like you belong there. But I won't, Callie thought. I never do. She looked at her mother's photograph again, that smile, frozen in a moment before illness stole everything bright. Her mother had been brave, had laughed too loud, loved too freely, lived too fully until she couldn't anymore. And in those final days, morphine soft and fading, she'd gripped Callie's hand and whispered, "Don't spend your life hiding in books, baby. Be the story." Callie took the dress. An hour later, she was wedged into Sienna's Mercedes, the red silk feeling foreign against her skin, her practical flats traded for heels that made her calves ache already. The city blurred past, familiar streets giving way to unfamiliar wealth, manicured lawns replacing cracked sidewalks, iron gates replacing chain-link fences. So, Callie ventured, watching Sienna's perfectly manicured hands on the steering wheel, whose party is this exactly? A family friend. Sienna's voice was too casual, which meant she was lying. Or at least strategically omitting. Sienna. What? It's true. Sort of. Sort of. My cousin knows someone who knows the family. It's fine. We're invited. Callie's stomach nodded. We're crashing. We're networking. Sienna shot her a grin that had probably gotten them both into and out of trouble in equal measure over the years. Relax. Nobody's going to ask for credentials at the door. Just smile, drink expensive champagne, and try to enjoy the fact that for one night, you get to see how the other half lives. The estate appeared like something from a Gothic novel, all stone and shadow, towering walls draped in ivy, windows glowing with warm light that somehow felt cold. Cars lined the circular drive, each one worth more than Callie's entire education. Women in jewel-toned gowns stepped from town cars, all sharp cheekbones and sharper eyes. Sienna, Callie breathed. What kind of party is this? But Sienna was already out of the car, smoothing her black dress, confidence radiating from every pore. The fun kind. Come on. Callie's heels clicked against cobblestone as they approached the entrance. Security flanked the doors, not party hosts, but actual security, the kind with earpieces and eyes that cataloged threats. One of them nodded to Sienna, as if he recognized her, which sent a fresh wave of unease through Callie's chest. Inside, the world transformed into something from another century. Marble floors gleamed beneath crystal chandeliers. A string quartet played in the corner, the music floating through air thick with expensive perfume and dangerous ambition. And everywhere, beautiful women circled like sharks in silk, assessing each other with smiles that never reached their eyes. This doesn't feel like a party, Callie whispered, gripping Sienna's arm. Just stay close. I'll introduce you around. But Sienna was already scanning the crowd, her expression shifting into something Callie didn't recognize. Calculation, hunger, purpose. A man in a tuxedo passed with champagne flutes. Callie took one, needing something to do with her hands. The glass was baccarat crystal, probably worth more than her monthly rent. Did you see her dress? A voice drifted from nearby. Two women, elegant and cold, speaking just loud enough to be heard. She actually thinks she has a chance. Please. He'll choose someone with connections. Someone useful. I heard the Rossi girl is the favorite. Unless the Battaglia family makes a better offer. Callie's unease crystallized into something sharper. Choose. Offer. This wasn't a party. This was an audition. She turned to tell Sienna they needed to leave, but her roommate had vanished into the crowd, leaving Callie alone in a sea of predators wearing pearls. Antonio Marchesi adjusted his cufflinks for the third time, a nervous habit he'd spent 20 years trying to break. The platinum caught light from the fire burning in his study's hearth, a fire in June, because his father believed atmosphere was half of power. Tonight you choose, or I choose for you. His father's voice cut through the room like a blade. Precise, unforgiving. Giovanni Marchesi stood by the window, silhouetted against the night, his 70 years worn like armor rather than age. I understand. Antonio's voice betrayed nothing. It never did anymore. Do you? Giovanni turned, and Antonio saw himself in 30 years. The same sharp features, the same cold eyes, the same emptiness masquerading as strength. Because your understanding has been notably flexible these past months. Antonio didn't rise to the bait. I said I would handle it. I will. Handle it by stalling? By finding excuses. His father moved closer, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop. The Rossi family is waiting. The Battaglias are waiting. Half of the families in this region are waiting to see who Antonio Marchesi deems worthy of carrying his name. And you're up here adjusting your goddamn cufflinks. The Wolf. That's what they called him in the streets, in the boardrooms, in the back rooms where deals were made and blood was occasionally spilled. Antonio the Wolf Marchesi. Feared, respected, untouchable. At 32, he'd built an empire on the foundation his father laid, expanding legitimate businesses while maintaining the less legitimate ones that actually kept them powerful. And none of it, not one single piece of it, belonged to him. Not really. Marriage is a merger, Giovanni continued, his lecture as familiar as breathing. Love is a liability. You choose someone who strengthens our position, who understands the life, who won't flinch when she learns what you really do. I know. Antonio's jaw ached from keeping his expression neutral. Then why do I still see doubt? Because doubt was all Antonio had left. Doubt and the growing certainty that if he chose someone tonight, anyone, he'd be sealing himself into a tomb of obligation wrapped in expensive sheets. But he didn't say that. Instead, he straightened his collar and met his father's eyes. You'll have your answer by midnight. Giovanni studied him for a long moment, then nodded. See that I do. When his father left, Antonio poured himself 2 fingers of scotch and stared into the amber liquid like it might contain answers. Below, in the ballroom, 200 eligible women were competing for the privilege of becoming Mrs. Antonio Marchesi. They knew what they were getting into. They understood the bargain, wealth and power in exchange for silence and obedience. It should have been simple. It should have been strategic. It should have felt like anything other than a noose tightening around his neck. Antonio finished the scotch in one swallow, set down the glass, and headed for the door. Time to descend. Time to choose. Time to become exactly what everyone expected him to be. The wolf doesn't have feelings, he reminded himself. The wolf doesn't hesitate. The wolf takes what he wants and feels nothing. He almost believed it. Callie found the grand staircase at the same moment Antonio reached it from the opposite side. Her descending from the floor where she'd gotten lost looking for an exit, him descending from his study where he'd been steeling himself for performance. They didn't see each other. Not yet. But below, in the ballroom where crystal caught light and ambition hummed in the air, the space between them was already collapsing, gravity pulling them toward an impact neither of them saw coming. The music swelled. The crowd parted. The hunt was about to begin. The ballroom felt like drowning in diamonds. Callie pressed herself against a marble column, champagne untouched in her hand, watching the spectacle unfold like some twisted Renaissance painting come to life. Women glided across the floor in calculated patterns, their laughter pitched just right, their glances razor-sharp beneath false sweetness. Every gesture was choreographed. Every smile was a weapon. And she didn't belong to any of it. Heard he's worth $500 million. The Rossi girl has the inside track. Her father and Giovanni go way back. Doesn't matter, it's about who can give him the most valuable alliance. The conversation swirled around her, puzzle pieces clicking into place with sickening clarity. This wasn't just a party. This was a selection. A cattle call dressed in Valentino and Versace. And somewhere in this room was the man they were all hunting. Callie's skin prickled with the sudden, desperate need to leave. To run. To go back to her safe apartment where the only expectations were the ones she placed on herself. She set down the champagne on a passing tray and turned toward the exit. But security stood at every door. Not threatening, exactly. Just present. Watching. The garden. She'd seen it through the windows. Vast, shadowed, probably with a dozen places to hide until she could figure out how to leave without causing a scene. Sienna would understand. Or she wouldn't, but Callie couldn't breathe in here, couldn't think, couldn't. She slipped through the French doors before anyone could stop her. The night air hit her like salvation. Callie kicked off her heels the moment her feet touched grass, the cool earth grounding her back into her body. The garden sprawled before her, all sculpted hedges and stone pathways, fountains murmuring in the darkness, roses blooming white as ghosts. It was beautiful. It was peaceful. It was exactly what she needed. She found a bench near an old fountain, tucked behind a curtain of wisteria, and pulled out the one thing she'd managed to smuggle into her small clutch purse, her mother's fairy tale book. The leather cover was worn soft from years of reading, the pages dog-eared and margin-noted in 2 different hands. Her mother's handwriting lived in these pages. Her last gift before the cancer stole her voice. Callie opened to a random page, east of the sun, west of the moon, and let the familiar words wash over her. A girl who loved a beast. A girl who broke a promise. A girl who had to journey to the ends of the earth to fix what she'd broken. All the best stories start with someone brave enough to leave home. But what if you're not brave? Callie whispered to the page, to her mother's ghost, to the night. What if you're just scared all the time? The fountain answered with its endless murmur. The wind rustled through leaves. And for a moment, Callie let herself imagine a different life. One where she was the kind of girl who belonged at parties like this, who knew how to navigate rooms full of beautiful predators, who could be bold instead of invisible. She laughed at herself, soft and sad. Even her fantasies were unrealistic. Antonio moved through the crowd like a shark through water. Smooth, inevitable, leaving ripples of tension in his wake. Mr. Marchesi, have you met my daughter, Gabriella? Antonio, I was hoping we could discuss the shipping contracts. Such a pleasure to finally meet you in person. Hands to shake. Names to remember. Women to assess like assets on a balance sheet. His father watched from across the room. Expression unreadable but expectations clear. Choose. Secure the family. Stop being difficult. Antonio smiled, nodded, said all the right things in all the right tones, and felt absolutely nothing. He was reaching for another obligatory champagne flute when movement caught his eye through the window. A flash of red disappearing into the garden. Quick, furtive, like someone fleeing a crime scene. Or a party they didn't want to attend. Antonio's curiosity stirred, a dormant beast waking after a long sleep. In a room full of women performing for his attention, here was one running away from it. "Excuse me," he murmured to the Battaglia daughter, currently discussing her family's import business. He didn't wait for her response. The garden transformed him. Inside, he was the wolf, controlled, calculating, cold. But out here, with moonlight silvering the pathways and jasmine sweetening the air, Antonio felt something loosen in his chest. Something dangerously close to freedom. He followed the sound of pages turning. She sat tucked behind wisteria, barefoot on a stone bench, completely absorbed in a book. The red dress made her look like a poppy blooming in shadow, bright, delicate, out of place in the most perfect way. Dark hair fell around her face, and as he watched, she smiled at whatever she was reading. Not the calculated smiles from inside. A real one, small and private and genuine. When was the last time he'd seen something genuine? Antonio stepped closer, careful not to startle her. He wanted to see what held her attention so completely, wanted to understand what could make someone smile like that when she laughed. Quiet, delighted, utterly unguarded. The sound hit him like a bullet he never saw coming. He was halfway to speaking, halfway to breaking the moment, when a voice called from the ballroom. "Antonio? Are you out here?" The spell shattered. The woman's head snapped up, and for one suspended heartbeat, their eyes met. Hers were the color of whiskey in firelight, brown flecked with gold, wide with surprise and something that might have been fear. She saw him, really saw him, not the reputation or the power or the name. Just him, caught in a moment of vulnerability he hadn't permitted himself in years. The fountain counted seconds between them. 1, 2, 3. Then she moved, a blur of red and panic, disappearing deeper into the garden like a deer who just realized she was in a wolf's territory. Antonio should have gone back inside. Should have returned to duty, to obligation, to the women who knew the rules of this game. Instead, he followed. Sienna found Callie's abandoned champagne flute and swore under her breath. Where did she go? A man's voice, smooth and commanding. Not Antonio, but close enough to make Sienna's spine straighten. "The garden, I think," she answered carefully, recognizing one of the Marquesi captains. She needed air. She should come back inside. The selection is about to begin. Sienna's stomach knotted. She'd known this was a risk, bringing Callie here. But the invitation had been real, sort of, and the opportunity too good to pass up. The Marquesi family didn't just throw parties. They offered chances, connections, ways into a world Sienna had been born adjacent to but never quite inside. She just hadn't expected them to notice Callie. Nobody ever noticed Callie. That was the point. That was the safety. "I'll get her," Sienna said, already moving toward the French doors. But when she reached the garden, Callie wasn't alone. Callie pressed herself against the far side of an ancient oak, heart hammering, clutch purse held to her chest like a shield. She'd seen him. The man from inside, the one all those women were hunting. Tall, dark-haired, devastating in a way that felt dangerous even from across a garden. And he'd looked at her like he was trying to solve a puzzle. Go back inside, she told herself. Find Sienna. Leave. Now. But her feet wouldn't move. Because underneath the fear was something else. Something reckless and curious and alive in a way she hadn't felt since before her mother died. You dropped this. Callie spun around. He stood 3 feet away, holding her fairy tale book like it was made of glass. Moonlight caught the sharp angles of his face. Handsome in a way that shouldn't exist outside of movies, with dark eyes that held too much knowledge and not enough warmth. I didn't drop it, she managed. I set it down. My mistake. He held it out, but didn't step closer. Like he knew she might bolt. You're not enjoying the party. It wasn't a question. I'm not supposed to be here, Callie said, then immediately regretted the honesty. Why had she said that? What was wrong with her? His expression shifted. Surprise, then something that might have been amusement. That makes 2 of us. I doubt that. She gestured toward the mansion, the ballroom glowing like a jewel box. This is your party. My father's party. The correction was swift, sharp. Then he seemed to catch himself, and the mask slipped back into place. Smooth, controlled, unreadable. You should come back inside. It's not safe out here alone. I'm fine. You're running away. I'm reading. In the dark. At a party you apparently crashed. Callie's cheeks burned. I didn't crash. My roommate. She stopped. What was she doing? Why was she explaining herself to a stranger who probably owned this entire estate? He took a step closer, and she became acutely aware of how small the space between them had become. How tall he was. How he smelled like cedar and something darker, something that made her pulse spike in warning. What's your name? He asked, voice dropping to something intimate, compelling. Does it matter? It does to me. Before she could answer, before she could decide if she even wanted to, Sienna's voice cut through the night. Callie! There you are! Her roommate materialized from the shadows, slightly breathless, eyes too bright. We need to go back inside. Now. Actually, I think I should just go home. Callie! Sienna's grip on her arm was steel wrapped in silk. Trust me. You need to come inside. Antonio watched the exchange with those 2 knowing eyes. Then he did something unexpected. He stepped back, creating space for her to leave. Giving her the choice. It was nice to meet you, Callie, he said, her name sounding different in his voice, like something valuable. I hope you enjoy the rest of your evening. It was a dismissal. A polite end to an encounter that never should have happened. So why did it feel like a promise? Sienna dragged her back through the French doors, through the crowd, toward a corner that offered at least the illusion of privacy. Women stared as they passed, some curious, some calculating, all clearly wondering who Callie was and why she'd been outside. What were you thinking? Sienna hissed once they'd stopped. That was Antonio Marchesi. I didn't know. The Antonio Marchesi. The wolf. The man this entire party is built around. Sienna's face was pale beneath her makeup. Callie, these women aren't here for fun. They're here because their families want an alliance with the Marchesi Empire. This is a bride selection, and you just had a private conversation with the groom in his garden. The words hit like cold water. A bride selection. Yes. And you brought me here knowing that. Sienna had the grace to look guilty. I thought you'd stay in the background. I thought we'd network, meet some people, and leave. I didn't think he'd notice you. But he had noticed. Those dark eyes finding her through the window. Following her into the garden. looking at her like she was something rare. Callie felt sick. I need to leave. Now. You can't. The announcement is about to happen, and if you leave now, it'll draw more attention. Sienna glanced around, calculating. Just stay quiet. Blend in. Once he makes his choice, we can slip out unnoticed. A bell chimed, crystal on crystal, calling for attention. The crowd shifted, parted, creating a natural aisle toward a raised platform at the room center. Antonio appeared from somewhere, his father beside him, both of them wearing expressions carved from marble. Callie tried to disappear into the wallpaper, tried to become invisible like she'd perfected over years of practice. But she could feel eyes on her, women's eyes, assessing and dismissing, guards' eyes, cataloging threats. And his eyes. Antonio stood on that platform, above the crowd, and his gaze swept the room like a searchlight. It passed over the Rossi girl, over the Battaglia daughter, over a dozen other beautiful, appropriate, suitable women, and stopped on Callie. Callie's breath caught as Antonio Marchesi held her in his sights like a verdict already decided. But is he choosing her, or marking her? Tell me where you're watching from. Hit that subscribe button, and stay tuned. Tomorrow's chapter goes deeper, darker, and even more irresistible.